Hi there and welcome to the channel of A Disappointed Man with me, Jason Kennedy, the Disappointed Man. And this is a very special moment for my channel. It's the first time I focus solely on poetry in one of my videos. And in fact, it will not just be one poem, but 12. The Lais of Marie de France. These are narrative poems from the 12th century. So let's begin as usual by saying something about our author, who in this case, the identity of is not really known for certain. The title Marie de France was only coined in 1581, centuries after the works with which the name is now linked were produced. In the manuscript itself, the only designation is the name Marie. So what scholars have done is taken internal evidence from the poems and some external evidence from a contemporary manuscript and identified a number of possible candidates, and the one that is the most glamorous and thus the most popular choice is Marie, Abbess of Shaftesbury, the illegitimate half-sister to King Henry II of England. The profile of Marie, Abbess of Shaftesbury matches very closely that required by the author of the Lais. They would have to have a thorough knowledge of theological discourse. They would need to be intimately acquainted with the goings-on at court. They would also need to be an accomplished linguist, fluent not only in anglo-norman, a dialect of Old Norman French, but also knowing some English words, some Breton words, and having Latin knowledge. That all makes Marie the preferred candidate. Now, what they did with the Lais was not produce original material, but take oral tales worn pebble smooth over the generations and apply a finish to them for the written form. Now, these lais were written to be performed in front of kings and queens, knights and ladies of the court, and so naturally they take as their subject matter kings and queens, knights and ladies of the court, and they cater to two principal areas of interest for this audience. The first of which is the chivalric activities of the knights, and so we have tournaments, skirmishes, wars, but these generally remain in the background, only coming to the front if they involve one of the principal male characters, because the central focus of these poems is courtly love and its intricacies. Love in these poems always causes suffering, frequently occasions grief, and may even, in extreme cases, lead to death. Although it differs in its expression, in its intensity, the love here is very reminiscent of the love in Wuthering Heights, Emily Bronte's 1847 novel, except, of course, Catherine is no lady and Heathcliff is certainly no knight. Along with chivalry and courtly love, there is one further element present in many of these poems, and that is the supernatural. These poems are set in a world of fairy queens, magical ships that pilot themselves, werewolves and men who transform into birds, and across the 12 lais, these basic elements are recombined in many ways to produce conclusions that are, by turn, joyous, tragic, and in a couple of cases, rather savage. In sum, what we have in the Lais of Marie de France might be considered as adult fairy tales, exquisitely crafted for a highly discerning audience and capable of being absorbed in a single sitting. What could possibly be better than that? I think it's time that I read you a little of them and you can judge for yourselves. But before I read, we have to speak briefly about editions, because, as I said, I read the first 3 lais in the Norton Anthology of the Middle Ages, and there they were in verse form, translated by Dorothy Gilbert. So I thought, great, all I need to do is find Dorothy Gilbert's translations of all of the lais and read the other 9. However, I also found a Penguin Classics edition of the lais. I thought, great, I'll get both and just see what the difference is between the two. Well, imagine my astonishment when I opened up the Penguin Classic and found that they hadn't translated the lais into verse form at all, but rather had rendered them in graceful English prose. So I had a problem. what I'll do is I'll read to you and then I will address the strengths and weaknesses of each of those approaches. Okay, this is from the opening of Le Fresne, the ash tree, which is a particularly fine example. In Brittany, in former years, there lived two neighbour chevaliers, important, prosperous, wealthy men, for worth and valour both well known. Close by, in one locality, they lived each with his own lady. One lady became pregnant when her term was up, her time had come. She bore two children. This event made her lord happy, jubilant, in his great joy and his delight. He sent word to his neighbour knight. His wife had borne two sons a sign, such increased vigour in his line. One son he wanted to present to his good neighbour, and he meant to give the child his neighbour's name. The rich knight sat at dinner. Came the messenger, who on his knees before the high dais spoke his piece. The knight gave thanks to God, and then a handsome horse gave to the man. The knight's wife, dining by his side, laughed at the news, though full of pride. Haughty, deceitful, envious, a slanderer, she spoke up thus, rashly and foolishly before all of the household serving her. So help me God, I marvel that this worthy sire could have a thought so to announce this way his shame and great dishonour to his name. His lady has two sons abased, both he and she, oh so disgraced. We know what is at work in this. It never ever was the case, or will be on this whole wide earth, that in one pregnancy, one birth, two babes are born. This case just shows two men have laboured in the cause. She got a look from her seigneur, and harsh was his reproach to her. Dame, he said, leave this well alone. You must not speak of this again. The truth is that this lady's been of fine repute, her words well known. The people present in the hall heard all, and they remembered all. Enough was said and told to be gossip throughout all Brittany. The mother hated savagely, was shamed, disgraced, in misery. The women all who heard this talk despised her, poor and wealthy folk. The messenger who brought the word told the whole story to his lord. Again repeatedly he heard, grieved, wondered what to do. Then toward his wife he too felt hate, disgust, suspicion, utter lack of trust. He kept her close in custody, not her just fate in any way. I hope that gives you a sense of the immediacy of these poems. They're so story driven. They just pull you in and you just want to find out what happens next. In this one, the lady who has slandered her neighbour for giving birth to twins then falls pregnant herself, and oh my goodness, who could ever guess what happens? Okay, now I'll read you the prose translation of the same passage. It goes like this. There once lived in Brittany two knights who were neighbours, rich and wealthy men, worthy and valiant knights from the same region. They had both taken a wife, and one of the ladies conceived, giving birth to two children when her time came. Her husband was happy and joyful, and because of his joy sent word to his neighbour that his family was increased, as his wife had had two sons. He also said that he would present one of them to him so that he could stand godfather to the boy, who would be named after him. Now before you yell, Jason, no contest, the verse translation wins, I agree with you on that point. However, the Penguin Classic Edition has an amazingly informative introduction by the two translators, Glyn Burgess and Keith Busby, and it's that I drew upon for most of the factual material in this video. The Dorothy Gilbert edition has a preface and no proper introduction. So my recommendation, put the two together, intro from the Penguin, lay from Dorothy Gilbert, and away you go. And as for which lay to start with, I would recommend Lanval, which is the only one of them based on the Arthurian romances. If you read Lanval and enjoy it, you will enjoy all of the other lay. If you read it and it's not for you, okay, I've saved you a whole bunch of time. So there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you will check out the work of Marie de France. It's free to access. Links are in the description below. And now, sadly, I must bid you farewell, but not before repeating my mantra. Be safe, be strong, and I shall see you anon. Nanu nanu.